Hey everybody, before we get started, I just remind you this episode is brought to you by our patrons like Adam the Harp, Icon Comics, Okay Zume, Architect Hand Black is the G, Carlos, Dragon, Ferris, Jeremy Vasquez, Jonathan Sandoval, Legendary Boss Hunter, Liam Kessler, Richard Raptor, Rogue Robin, Charvor, Shiny P, Sun Guy named Bob, 723, and Varian the Crow. If you like what we do and want to see us do more, consider supporting us on Patreon and get access to episodes early, and that's what really helps out. Thank you for your support, everybody. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Talk FGO Wanted, the show where we let you know if you want to roll that 5-star. Never rains, it pours, huh, guys? Well, it's raining men today, since we're talking about Superhuman Orion, usually Super Orion for short. But we have a lot of hits to cover in the next few weeks. Europa will be coming soon as I have free time after this. And there's a Saber Astolfo somewhere not long after that. And then there's New Year's. It just keeps happening, guys. Just keeps rolling. So we'll try not to take up too much of your time and move on to the meat. But let's take out one of those there meta servants and see what there is to see. So remember, if this is your first time watching Let's Take FGO Wanted, the way Wanted works is we will break down a character's real-life history and mythology, their fate lore with a capital L. We will then discuss their mechanics and some other synergy things, know how to use them. And we will, of course, talk about their rarity. Not their tri-star rarity, but how frequent their rate-ups are. As we mostly do SSRs, because nobody watched the limited SR videos. I mean that in a general sense. If you personally watched it, feel free to comment about it, but go look at the view numbers. You'll see what I mean. But yeah, that's where we're at with this. I've done the whole intro. Let's jump into that history, because boy howdy, this is long. So, Orion is a fairly well-known Greek mythological figure, with a multitude of myths after him. And he's also the namesake of a constellation which itself is fairly well-known and visible across the world. The constellation also contains a couple of very well-known bright stars, Rigel and Betelgeuse. Yes, that is actually how you pronounce that star name. Now, the constellation Orion is so recognizable that we found prehistoric carvings of its shape, which are between 40 and 30,000 years old. That's right, this motherfucker old. To the Babylonians, this constellation was known as the True Shepherd, and the Egyptians knew it as the god Sa, who is syncretized with Osiris, and important to the solar calendar. That's a theme that comes back a lot. In many other cultures, the constellation is usually associated with hunters, archers, or horned animals such as deer, bison, bighorn sheep, etc. So, you notice a theme here. People have recognized this shape for a long time, and generally agree it looks like something. Now, obviously, we are focusing on the Greek aspect here. Let me adjust my mic arm slightly closer to my face. I feel like I'm not being loud enough. But since this is explicitly Orion, we focus on the Greek. Orion is a culture hero and a mythological hunter in Greek history, the mythographic one, obviously, as well as the personification of the constellation of the same name. So his mythological existence is well attested, but depending on the source, major episodes of his life may be left out or altered. So, there's a couple of different origin stories, a couple of different stories of what he does with his life, various episodic elements relating from birth to space. Space birth. Now, our oldest outlines of Orion are pretty old. He is mentioned as already being an asterism in the Iliad and the Odyssey, and Odysseus meets his shade in the underworld hunting animals with a bronze club with his loyal dog Sirius, also the namesake of a star. Homer also alludes to a hunter who is the most handsome of earthly men, able to hunt down any animal, and lover of the goddess of the dawn, Eos, who is then slain by Artemis, but either does not directly connect the two or refers to the constellation and the hunter in the underworld as separate people. So, the space hunter and Orion the huntsman existed, but to Homeric poetry they were not necessarily conflated. But Hesiod has more to say about Orion's origin and history. He details in Works and Days the constellation's relationship with the sun and how it's used to reckon the year. There's a lot of solar calendar and timekeeping elements to these myths and things. And also, he had a lost work, Astronomia, which was summarized later by Eratosthenes. I think I pronounced all the syllables on that one. And this gave some details of his birth, life, and death, but we don't actually have the Astronomia. So we only have what later people said was in the Astronomia. So take all this with your first grain of salt. There will be several grains. So in this version, allegedly accounted by Hesiod, Orion is the son of Poseidon, god of the Brocian, and the daughter of King Minos named Eurale, but not that Eurale. FGO also explicitly notes this, but yeah, it's not that Eurale. His relationship with Poseidon gives him the power to stride the waves. Yes, he can walk on water. This is actually in the myths. And most importantly, for the text we are told anyway, he visits the island of Chios, or possibly Chios. It's probably Chios. It's Greek. Anyway, it's in the Eastern Aegean. It's right next to Turkey. He gets smashed on wine because Chios is known for this. We'll come back to some of that later. And he assaults the king's daughter, Merope. In revenge, the king, Enopion? There's an E in there. Anyway, he blinds Orion, who is led by some sort of assistant to Hephaestus' forge. The forge god tells him to go way far east, and Helios, the sun god, will heal his eyes. After this, Orion goes back to Chios, but the king hides underground, and he cannot find him, and he goes about his business. This whole bit of the myth may have some context to the solar calendar in regards to how Orion scoots around the sky, right? And so these bits are probably the quoted bits from Astronomia. Now, after this situation, Orion decides to go chill on the island of Crete, where he hunts with the goddess Artemis and her mother Leto. During the course of this, he boasts that he could kill every animal on Earth, so Gaia sends a scorpion to kill him. Feeling bad about her hunting buddy getting murked, Artemis and her mom asks Zeus to put Orion up in the heavens, and he does so, but not without also putting the scorpion there, because Zeus has a terrible sense of humor. Now, there's a couple of fun notes here that we want to keep track of, because this stuff ties back to your many FGO lore bits you may or may not remember. So it is not specified who the Minoan Euryale's mother is, so it's unknown if it was Pasiphae, or if it was some other lady Minos banged. King Minos having several concubines and girlfriends, in addition to his wife, the queen. So it is unclear if Orion is meant to be related to the Minotaur, Kirke, Medea at all. However, the king of Chios, Onepion, is also a demigod. He is the son of Dionysus and Ariadne, who is also a daughter of Minos. It's after that whole thing, she gets left alone. Dionysus is like, hey, babe. So Merope would be like Orion's double cousin. Do better, Hunter Man. It should also be noted that in some retellings of Hesiod's accounting, people telling you what Hesiod told you earlier, the scorpion sender is reimagined as Apollo, who is concerned with Artemis being so friendly with a dude. And if this sounds very summary-like, it's because it is. We don't have the original poem on Orion. We just have asides, allusions, margin notes in Hesiod and Homer, and then the summaries there, which are accounted by later poets and historians. So some of our early stuff is a little loosey-goosey. A lot of it's summary, and the originals are lost. But we have some later attestations and variants coming to us from some of the Latin commentators. So quite a few sources tie in Orion to the history of Boeotia? Budia? It's a region in Greece associated with the Greek Thebes. In this case of this legend, Hyrieus of Boeotia, himself a son of Poseidon, offers Zeus, Poseidon, and Hermes the sacrifice of an entire bull, and they enjoy it so much that they will grant his boon. He asks for a child since he has none. They take the bull's hide, bury it in the ground. 10 months later, Orion is born and raised by Hyrieus, his adopted father. He is said in these myths to have 3 fathers, and in some cases, Gaia is listed as his mother. This is where that whole earthborn thing we talked about earlier and later comes in. Obviously, this is not necessarily where FGO goes, but this was a popular element here. Some other Roman sources note the whole earthborn thing, and in particular, note that he is a being of enormous size. Yes, him being a huge slab of man-meat is variably canon. They also say that before all his shenanigans, he did have a wife, Psyche, who was cast into Hades by Hera for being prettier than her. Just winning all the best awards, Hera. On to the year. After all this, the goddess Eos fell in love with Orion and took him to the island of Delos, where Artemis herself killed him. I'm not entirely sure why Artemis keeps killing him for being friends with Eos. Maybe it's because they're doing like PDAs on her home island. I don't know. Now, some of these summaries also start presenting the more tragic version of Artemis killing Orion and deeper relationships with some of the other established constellations. Apollo becomes jelly of Orion's feelings towards Artemis. He challenges his sister to hit a target way out in the sea, which she does so directly, and then Orion's body washes ashore. She weeps and places among the stars herself, because she didn't really mean to shoot that guy. That was just Apollo being an asshole. Sources in this period also start connecting Orion to the Pleiades, the star cluster in the heavens, his dogs also being in the constellations, and in addition to his relationship of being chased by Scorpio the Scorpion, also chasing possibly Lepus the Hare constellation or Taurus the Bull constellation. Basically, because his identity as the constellation is well established during this time period, he gets roped into a lot of space stuff. So, naturally, being so ancient, but without a solid singular source being preserved, there is no clear-cut single poem o Orion. That's probably what, like I said, Astronomia was. There's many iterations and elements, including how variably Artemis, Apollo, or Gaia is responsible for killing Orion, where he dies, how he becomes blinded and cured exactly, who or what helps him in his quest, who Merope even is, and what his relationship is like with her. Like, sometimes he's trying to woo her, and her dad's just like, no, I don't want this weird hunter caveman. Some even connect him to Asclepius. But there is one extra bit we should talk about here. Well, I have a couple of extra bits. I have 3 bullet points left. But there's a major plot arc here you need to know about. Orion is a major culture hero in Boeotia, as noted above. There was a cult of worship for him there, and they built a tomb to Orion, placed at the base of Mount Tanagra, which is associated with Hyrieus, and claimed that he brought oracles. He would, send messages. He was alleged to have 50 sons, which is a very traditional number for culture heroes, with the daughters of the local river god, and his own daughters, usually with Side, Menepe and Metioke. Metioke? There's an E at the end. They sacrificed themselves to save their country and were transformed into comets as a result. So, again, lots of stellar stuff, lots of, not quite nationalism, but you know what I mean, regional cultural hero aspects. Orion is a big deal. Now, interestingly enough, Orion also has some lore in Sicily. He is said to have built the famous Pharaoh Point in the city of Messina, and also built a temple to Poseidon there. Orion is a popular symbol in Messina to this day. And even allegedly, I believe the Messina Cathedral is supposed to be built over where they found the ruins of the Poseidon Temple. Now, interpretations of Orion as Artemis's one true crush mostly seem to be the fault of Roman poets who decided it was about unrequited love, and a couple of Baroque-era opera composers took it this way. Some people may lay the blame on the feet of the Renaissance romantics. That doesn't quite seem right. He was in some classical art, but it was mostly stuff to do with him being, like, blinded and wandering the wilderness. The love stuff, like I said, is mostly Roman poets being fancy, and then some opera writers. Thankfully, this lore segment will be much shorter than that. So, Orion is an interesting figure in Fate. Specifically, he has appeared in FGO, and from all the way back in the beginning, one of FGO's first events, the Moon Festival. Does Moon Goddess dream of dumplings? Blah, 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 whatever you want to call it. However, this appearance of Orion was actually the goddess Artemis hijacking Orion's saint graph, so she takes on the role of Orion. The actual Orion's personality and abilities are confined mostly to a mascot-like bear character, with Artemis Orion taking on the more dominant role. So, for a long period in the Moon Festival, Artemis pretends to be Orion, thus establishing her own character, but some of Orion's as well, even though it doesn't really come out till the end that she's not actually Orion. But Artemis and Orion are also major supporting characters in the Okeanos chapter of Part 1, where Orion was summoned to the Singularity and Artemis inserted herself, resulting in the usual relationship we see in the normal, permanent Orion character. In this case, it is noted that in the Singularity Okeanos, she displays primarily abilities which belong to Orion, walking on water, and not herself, as she can't use her divine authority to one-shot Herc like she normally would. This is an little plot point in the story. Now, taking info from both Orion versions' profiles, we can tell for the most part his Fate version is taken from the broad strokes of some of those earliest myths, though a few of those later flavor details are added, such as the being huge thing. Orion, in FGO, is the child of Poseidon and Eurale, daughter of Minos, not that other Eurale, and is a giant lad who can walk the ocean. He has a reputation as a hunter, and is a playboy who pursues women, including goddesses, which results in him being blinded due to a certain incident with a woman, and the dawn goddess Eos curing him after he is guided to her by the sound of hammering, so kind of kit-bashing several of those blindness-curing incidents together. In this version, Artemis displays affection towards Orion first. They hang out, and she's like, oh, he's nice. But he's more reserved and respectful with her than other women because he senses danger. Even so, a rumor that they're dating gets around, and the jealous Apollo tricks his sister into shooting Orion, floating in the distant sea, killing him. As usual, she weeps over the body, and first plans to have him revived by Asclepius, but Asclepius is conveniently blown up by Zeus before this happens, so she places him in the heavens. Note that for later reasons, I don't know entirely what the scorpion thing is doing. Maybe we'll address that in the story. But he still has the scorpion bit. even though that doesn't make any sense. But hey, myths. Sometimes they have contradictory elements, and the Throne of Heroes, collates stuff. Super Orion, though, is a major supporting character in Lost Belt 5 Part 1 Atlantis, so look out for that coming soon, TM. And yes, you'll notice that was about 3 minutes, whereas his real-life myth was like 10 minutes. His lore in Fate is pretty simple, and it is true to most versions of this, other than the particular relationship with how Artemis works. And even so, not that weirdly out of place. Alrighty now. Super Orion is a very interesting archer. So he has the highest attack to date in this class, and manages to not have the worst HP. I think he's like 4th or 5th from the bottom. It's decent. And he has a unique gorilla deck with an arts NP. That's right, there are no other archer gorillas. So as a result, despite the fact that his arts and quick card each have not bad hit counts, his NP gain is sky high natively. It's like 0.96. You can see it on the screen. It's big. Big, 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 big. So it puts him in a very unique position. Now, Orion's NP here makes this kit. It propels him forward as a unique solo striker. He is a man designed to just go it alone and punch everything. It gives him a powerful 3 turns of Pierce, straight up, a 30 to 50% attack increase for 3 turns. This is the only thing that increases with NP levels, by the way. Gives him debuff immunity for 3 turns, 10 stars per turn for 3 turns, flat, of course, and also increases his critical damage for 3 turns based on overcharge, starting at a whopping 100%. So he straight up doubles his crit damage for 3 turns by default, not accounting for other stuff. So basically, he's going to be doing big damage you can't duck, barring some special buffs for story stuff, for several turns, and probably not going to get seriously mezzed doing it. And God help you if you can get some of these buffs to stack. If you get some arts crits in there or something, lordy. Big damage. Big damage, oh lordy. So let's talk his skills, though, really quick, because there's not a lot to strategize about a self-buff NP. His first skill is a Mana Burst, and also a 30 to 50% trait damage against both Beast and Demonic enemies for 1 turn. It has a shorter cooldown, so you primarily use this on your Buster Brave Chain turn, when you can string all 3 together. But it is only 1 turn, so watch out for that. The second skill gives him a 1-time 3 turns Guts with a max of 3k, the usual 1k to 3k. It gives him a further 10 to 20% attack up for 3 turns, and gives him an immediate infusion of 10 to 20 stars, so you can see how this integrates into the strategy. The final skill gives him 3 turns of Star Absorb up, and also a 3 times 3 turns trigger of increasing your critical damage before you use a Buster card, at least that's how it's phrased to me, before you use the Buster card, by 50 to 100% for 1 turn. So a very inclusive kit there. Passives are Independent Action EX for even more crit, a special Blessing of Poseidon Divinity, which gives him both a damage plus and a damage cut, but also a demerit where he does take 20% more damage from poison. So this is probably not a problem, but you do want to watch out for this during certain CQs and story fights, probably. Now, the strategy here is clear. Let me spell it out for you. Ideally, you build up Orion to fire his NP, then you use his skills to empower himself to ideally do Buster Brave Chains, because he's got 3 Buster cards, with huge crit amps, resulting in some of the craziest damage output in the game. I don't think he's, like, the most damage man ever. We talked about Arjuna Alta, for instance, who has crazy, crazy high max damage. But for face cards, he does some ludicrous damage, and may actually be the largest. I have not double-checked the math. Now, because a few of his buffs last several turns, you can get him to work around break bars, though obviously his most intense damage is only on certain turns. That Mana Burst and trait damage being only 1 turn, even on a 5-turn cooldown, means that you will have some limitations when it comes to damage turns. Now, how you actually arrange the Buster Brave Chains is a bit up in the air. You have a couple of choices for this. Obviously, the easiest way is you can use the traditional lower rarity taunters like George and Leonidas, keeping in mind that Leonidas has further Team Buster and later attack up buffs that may be worth something, to basically try and take some hits, and then you end up with Super Orion being the only servant standing, so he gets all Brave Chains all the time. It's a pretty classic strategy. Just look up Super Orion solo. You'll see this setup. Now, obviously, that is a primo strategy, but I will offer you some alternatives. Some people don't like to futz with solos. They have lots of other servants they want to use that are very fancy and expensive. There's a couple of ways you can take this. I would suggest you can try some exotic Summer combos. You could use Summer BB to lock in Orion's deck and also generate stars per turn with that skill. Or you could use Summer Buntoria to shuffle and discard certain cards, given that both Summer BB and Summer Artoria Bunny have Buster NPs and a couple of Buster cards. This may be a good way to clear ads, because they're both AoE, and let Orion focus on a boss while keeping Buster Chains. Though obviously not Brave Chains, you can still do your damage amp this way. Keep it in mind. In terms of general support, if you don't want to try and wrap your brain around the solo and all your taunts and whatever, consider also various tanks and healers who may end up being taunting anyway. Orion's only defensive skill is a Guts with a 6-turn cooldown and some built-in damage cuts. So if the enemy actually gets to lay some smack on you, you may have a problem. Obviously, if you're ideally doing your damage amps, the enemy won't live long enough, but break bars exist, so keep it in mind. And of course, while it does fuck with your card math, the Humble Dick Wizard Merlin will send Orion's damage into outer space with hero creation. I don't know what double Merlin Orion is like, but if you can make those buster cards work, oh lordy, that has got to be huge. And it gives him the max HP and the invulns you'd want to tank enemies who are going to do annoying things when you break those break bars. Now for CEs, I've seen a couple of angles here. On videos on the internet, I usually see people using the Beautiful Dreamer CE. It was in a Valentine's a while back, and I think it was this year's Valentine's, actually. It has U-Python on it. You'll recognize it. It offers you 50% gauge start, 10% buster up, and 10% NP gain max limit break. Too many N's and M's in this script. So basically, take this as a starting point for the kind of stuff you want. You can go for the 50% gauge, because obviously he only has a few cards which generate NP. You can go for the buster up, the NP gain up, whatever works for you. You could obviously just go Golden Sumo like everybody does. You could go for an MLB K-Scope and have him ready to go immediately, but that might be a bit of a waste stat-wise. There's a few options here. Got it? Okay. Now, Ascending Orion shouldn't be too much trouble, though some of you may be struggling with those proofs if you're a newer player, but most of his mats are not crazy. They've been around a while. The main issue will come with his skills, which involve a couple of bronze mats, always a big deal for us. So newer players are probably hard up for all those proofs. It's 44 per skill. Even if you have a lot stocked up from the launch days, that's still a lot. And everybody will probably shake a stick at those 24 stand errors per skill, considering that only came out earlier this year. Oh yeah, and he needs 10 of a brand new Comet Shard mat per skill. So I don't know if you get 30 from the main quest rewards, but even so, it's going to clear out your stock, and you may have to farm. Luckily, it's only the second to last one, but still. Brand new mats right at the end. 10. Sucks butts. Can't even pre-farm it. Now, it should be noted that for banner rarity, Super Orion is not very common. He appears, obviously, on the Atlantis release banner, hence why we're talking about him, and he does have a solo rate-up on New Year's 2021, which will be 2023 for us. If you need a landmark, this is the Muramasa release banner, and I said that's a solo rate-up. He is on a rotation. It is not the same day as Muramasa, as far as I can tell. So, no mixed there. Other than that, as a limited SSR, he appears in all future Lucky Bag GSSR summons in one form or another. Now, I will tell you that while he appears on that New Year's, I am speculating. This means it is possible he may appear on a Thanksgiving raid-up instead here in NA, which would be another solo day raid-up. Now, obviously, that is like immediately before Heian-Kyo comes out and all that stuff, but still, he could have a solo raid-up that is at least divorced from Muramasa if you're in a money-spending mood. It's a whole different month. So keep that in mind, but there's no guarantee of that, right? We don't know for sure. Though this big chungus being on Thanksgiving, I think would make sense. Anyway, that's Wanted. I hope you enjoyed all that stuff. Sorry the mechanics bit is shorter, but he is a literal Unga Bunga red card go burr unit. There's not a lot of strategy. It's all in just the timing of the skills and making the chains. So, yeah, there's that. I hope you enjoyed the really long history and lore segment, though. Alrighty, that's Wanted. For Super Orion, anyway. I have several more of these to churn out over the next few weeks. Expect Europa to be probably next week by the time I get done with it, because I have lots of other stuff to do in the week, probably. So we'll get there when we get there. I know she's not as anticipated as Orion is. But I'll still deliver. I'll deliver, damn it. You won't watch, but I'll deliver it. And, of course, I would also like to throw out, obviously, we appreciate your feedback. I'm trying a slightly different thumbnail style. I hope it's nice and eye-catching and cool. Did a little edits to some of the styles and formats there to make it even more new and improved. I am open to improving and modifying the general text body of some of the displays and the infographics if you're interested. If you have any ideas what you would prefer better there, or if just the classic, like, white text spelling out everything works. You know, white background, simple plain text, all that stuff. Let us know in the comments below. First of all, make sure to like this video if you liked it. Feed that algorithm. Let it know you want to watch more Let's Talk FGO Wanteds. Leave a comment down below, your success on the banner, whatever. Do remember, no future spoilers. This will be going live before anybody can actually play Lost Belt 5 Part 1 in English. So no spoilers in the comments. I will delete you. Not your comment, I'll delete you. But, of course, if you want to celebrate getting Super Orion, be sure to drop that down in those comments. I know people swear by the catalyst effect of Wanted. or at least they say in the comments. If you always want to make sure you get our latest Let's Talk FGO Wanteds when they come out, make sure to hit that subscribe button, and make sure to ring that bell for notifications, so when I post these in the middle of a maintenance, you guys know when they drop. Just sends you right to the video. You can also join our Discord. Link is in the video description and channel page as always. You can join our channel memberships on YouTube, join button, or link in the description. Get access to membership badges and emotes. And of course, like I said at the front of the show, you can consider supporting us on Patreon. You could have gotten this video several hours, I think a calendar day early, depending on how rushed I was. And future videos earlier as well. Sometimes I get way in advance with Wanted. I'll post it like 3 or 4 days, so it's a sliding scale. But you can get the video early. You can listen to Let's Talk FGO get recorded live. You get access to audio downloads of our podcasts, all kinds of other good things, and it really helps us out. I do recommend, though, if you are consider supporting us on Patreon, wait until the calendar date says December 1st. You will get double charged, so please be careful with your money. I want it, but not that badly. And that's the bit. So there's the outro. I'll see you guys next Wanted. Make sure to check out Let's Talk FGO for last week if you want more info on the upcoming Lost Belt, and make sure to stay tuned for later in this week for our first impressions of the Lost Belt. All right. See you, everybody. Unga bunga.